Potential one is space. Mars' insight reads it was 25. Having full present had a relationship with Mars colonizer who transformed rocketry, thus flying starships to transfer people on Mars. This is quite a moment for getting to Mars. It is clear we're going to get a Mars program started. Mars program started. It is clear, yeah. Trump challenged NASA to narrow down the move from the Moon to Mars, help exploration be efficient. Because of the way planets align with Mars open from 600 must start next year. Reliable energy allows us to keep the sun in combo 21. Establishing Mars requires much reliable power not being developed without a power system. Studies on Martian requirements are needed. Studies, yes, these are more mission requirements to be careful mission warm planet, thick atmosphere with obtaining water. Mars is not the end future mission. Our bond stays Mars with great outputs of mission missions range from 4 to 10,000, all interdependent on having power to ramp the population up. Burning is less solution with money. Nuclear are faced by lack of life provides underground for electricity for recharging energy system that keep astronauts alive. On the winning one deep Mars supports struggles to collect light batteries but limited lifetimes. Nuclear fission provides power for space settlement for years. NASA developed nuclear fission system for space. 4 of these to provide power up to the Mars module can design light moving up to space. Every kilogram counts. Reactor pass safely. Uranium and its particles can't penetrate skin. Reactors future depend on sufficient planning before Mars. That enables a lot of motivation less money. Mars is like 2 decades as I go to testing for the later groundwork for exploration of the GPS program as an exploring catalyst for innovation from GPS and medical to Fairmont, NASA, to look out for collaborations with scientists around the world. As we successfully colonize or safely enable trying to 2016. Tech progress can lead to more sustainable world that existential this will not be able to overcome without advances in endeavors. Natural engineering, asteroids, sustainable volcanoes, primitive civilization spread beyond Earth, enabled by space flight is likely to endure. Every single matter of 14. Loss equal to 10 to 14 miles per second until delayed colonization. Many stars will reach some planet planets hospital for life. Key is 44. The US lead the space age. The US provide 81% of launch capacity, 4 times the world. Combined introduction of larger US vehicles for SpaceX Starship will further increase lead. Potential to transition. Clean energy transition is another robust possible in 21. Clean energy not passing out of vitamin C, and energy net usage energy prices oil as well. This is limiting warnings and healthy energy remains below, creating supply disruptions. And deep Western 4. The transition to renewable world is increasing about 1200 from large number of federal efforts only nuclear energy solve investments key goes to 24. Economic generating purchases 3 barrels of oil, including solar materials and land, civil land, weather powers operate are less reliably 3 times many years as women solar accidents that left underinvestment up for cost made it difficult to support governments need to shoulder high costs. Repurposing machines mass development after 724 as a matter of repurposed coal plants, repurposing sites with nuclear office clean energy. Now 79 people sites from coal and nuclear existing transition less power reduced construction time. Scenario 1 is climate change. Nuclear energy is key for chemicals 1.2. Transportation television during operation variable plan 1 30 plants can replace fossil fuel nuclear reduce CO2 nuclear energy nuclear company CO2 emissions. Coverage is essential to 2023. Since 2023 emissions reduce concept is warming overwarming rapid capacity levels in neglect and events such as the underground lines and loss. Climate change exacerbate external damage, loss of land and water due to security effects, which drive conflicts and diseases. Cause worldwide collapse. Scenario 2 is people go guarantee economic collapse will accelerate transition to all on 3. The world is on edge, sectors are interconnected, energy prices have inflationary effect, oil is the US shale is over. Production energy have economic impact for US produce 70% of global oil producers not able to fill in production peak around 2025. Cut the rest. The energy irreversible and instant town landfills contain lower quantities of commercial vehicles have high operating have high cost offers are located in 2008 quickly immediately after cost will skyrocket not just similar to shortages of the 70s. Nuclear energy insight shocks to the 10. Current energy prices in the 70s because oil trickled it will provide 85% of energy for current energy system diversify. Nuclear energy reduces stability of oil depends on imports nuclear energy crucial of oil. After national World War II, 2018, rising energy Russia Iran confidence into aggressive behavior. Revenue budget purchases attached to war and military are now used oil to fund off. Armed forces making itself likely long-term aviation increase prices over the 13% increase in dispute. Oil prices encourage rate to prices to like markets to armed intervention oil to reduce towards and conflicts by conflict of market domination. Process actually.
Download your document, I'll just send one. I'm going to send her a document, I'll send Mark.
Can you mark the document or mark?
It's already marked, the document that was sent. The red, not red.
No, you cut out highlighting.
Those red stuff is not red.
Oh, okay, so you just, okay, gotcha. Okay, I see some.
Yeah, not just the one. previously. I'm gonna resend it.
I just got it.
Just got it.
Do y'all want to go over again?
No.
All the judges got the document, right? Okay, wait a second. Yeah. Yeah. I'm gonna go back. Time starts now. We negate contention when a sport clock. Courts are working efficiently now as Reuters 23 finds the courts investing in improved innovations, remote hearing, sprinkle investments. The app opens the floodgates and overburdens the courts. Bill 13 finds that program tax for the regulatory burdens, legal challenges will be. We'll expect endless stream of lawsuits. Empirics prove, as News 25 finds, the lawsuit against the NRC, Utah, and Texas are in a lawsuit. Near risk of litigation decimates innovation, as League 21 finds that costly litigation deters investment, amplifies loss of sales, disruption lines, and bankruptcy. Innovation solves existential risks, as Hagerty 17 finds. Tech advances lead us to a sustainable world. Existential risks overcome with advances in tech. Pandemics, asteroids, eruption, advances in spaceflight are likely to endure. Contention 2 is biodiversity. Affirming overstretched the NRC risking accidents, as Gilbert 21 finds that due to limited resources, the NRC was unable to develop rules, reviews to be lengthy and involve unexpected costs. Advanced reactors pose additional burdens. That shreds oversight, as CBS 19 finds that the NRC's cost-cutting moves reduces time and scope of inspections, weakens security, leads to disaster. Independently, mining causes loss, as Good 23 finds that uranium mines discarded waste rock, winds spreading it far and wide. Uranium mills leave behind toxic compounds called tailings that are poured into massive ponds on site. Moreover, improper disposal dex diversity, as FJ23 finds that radioactive waste is a concern to water pollution, remain hazardous for thousands of years, leads to failures in containment structures, leads to the release of radioactive materials. Accidents deck biodiversity, is Olson at all 11 finds that the radiation thousands of kilometers away, consequences are substantial and long-term. Permanent genetic alterations occur, affects the entire species. Any biodiversity loss will cause cataclysmic extinction, as Exeter 18 finds that the loss of one leads to greater risk of runaway extinction cascades. Interactions between species are important for ecosystems, and impact on one species can affect other. Biodiversity loss can cause runaway extinction cascades, and biodiversity loss empirically causes war. As LSO9 finds that 80% of armed conflicts in the most biologically threatened places on Earth, 90% of major armed conflicts occurred in biodiversity hotspots. Intention 3 is HALU. Nuclear facilities are safe for now, as Earnhardt at Hall 21 finds that while extremists are motivated, no extremist groups have obtained the resources to carry out nuclear terrorism. New reactors will be built with HALU, as Robinson 24 finds that HALU is a nuclear reactor fuel that can be employed in nuclear weapons, historically limited to research in small quantities. New advanced reactors are designed to run on HALU. A single reactor contains enough HALU to make a nuclear weapon, but a lack of DOE funding is preventing its implementation, as Geiger 25 finds when Trump's frozen DOE activities missions are on pause. App funding less for HALU reactors is sinking at all 24 finds. Successful deployment depends on production and supply chain management of HALU, modernizing current production facilities with HALU. That affects runaway terror and proliferation. Nuremberg 24 finds that they're only days away from bomb, giving the international community no warning of proliferation, no opportunity to prevent terrorists repurposing commercial reactor fuel. Nuclear reactor designs today use HALU. Safeguards fail and reactors get exported, as UCS 17 finds that reprocessing poses prolif and terror risk. It provides greater opportunities for diversion or theft. Safeguards and security are costly and cumbersome. U.S. vendors seek to export new reactors. Other countries are likely to emulate the U.S. program. Indeed, Accountable 25 finds that Energy Secretary Rice, a member of nuclear company, Wright will vote the other way when companies violate safety. It's uniquely likely now, as Earnhardt et al. 21 finds that a nuclear attack is a perfect tool to sow chaos. Extremists have an explicit intent in nuclear terrorism, documented attempts by extremists. Even one attack escalates, as Lewis 18 finds a small bomb would cause unprecedented catastrophe. Global distrust sparks tensions, leads to nuclear use, decreased self-control, escalates present conflicts. And independently, prolif ensures extinction, as PAC 17 finds the risk of power-hungry and vengeful states, faulty intelligence, nuclear malfunctions, or the risk of theft by non-state actors with nuclear capability are too deadly to chance.
Cool. You ready for thoughts?
Yep.
You ready for James for the session?
Sorry, just give me.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Okay. Your earn head of the all 21 evidence, the line that you read is extremist groups have obtained the resources to carry out nuclear terrorism, but what you skip is extremist groups have not obtained the resources or exhibited the requisite operational sophistication. How do they get the requisite operational sophistication?
Yeah, the reason why is the Earnhardt evidence is written before HALO reactors. The evidence is saying that they aren't able to enrich traditional uranium fuels. Our argument specifically that HALO is already enriched enough to the point where they can create nuclear weapons.
Where does it talk about enrichment?
What?
Where does that first piece of evidence on Earnhardt talk about enrichment?
That's the context of the card. You can read like more of the
So
context.
can you like give me where the context is?
I mean, I can pull it up, but that's literally what the entire article is talking about. Moreover, like our evidence, our Nuremberger evidence which postdates, the Sinky postdates, like Geiger postdates, all the times that
The Nuremberger evidence says, quote, states are days away from getting a bomb, and then you add on the part about terrorism towards the end.
No, the warranty is still there, right? The fact that the uranium is already enriched.
Sure, alright. You want to question?
Yeah. Let's talk about the space argument.
Yep.
Your argument is about putting like nuclear fuel on Mars and terraforming. How is that domestic nuclear investment?
Yeah, so to create those SMRs that we then put in other places, you have to create them domestically first.
So it's SMRs that then get exported to Mars. Which piece of evidence says that we're going to be able to export nuclear back to Mars?
Yeah, so I think, let's see. The combo evidence says it.
Read me a line.
Yeah. Wait, just kidding, it's not the combo evidence, it's the window evidence.
Where does it say?
Alright. So, nuclear fusion provides power for settlement for years. Second, NASA's already developing and it's only needing like more funding. Fourth, 4 of these reactors are all we need to get it. Fifth, the modular compact design is light enough to go into space. Sixth, it's not dangerous because the uranium particles are
Which actor is going to send them to space? And what
Do you know where NASA is? The United States. Cool. Do you mind if I take questions?
Sure.
Okay. Let's talk about. Alright. On your argument about core clog, where does it say the word nuclear anywhere?
It's the context of the card. Like it says.
The Gilbert 21 is in the context of climate policy, so you're saying any climate policy should trigger core clog?
So is
Yes or no?
Is nuclear
Do
energy,
any climate policy trigger core clog? Yes or no?
I think nuclear energy is definitely far more of a cause because they rely on advanced reactor designs.
That's not answering my question.
I mean, it is, right? Like I.
No, should
You're
other climate
referring to
policies
as
cause
binary,
core
we're just
clog?
Supposed to assuming NRC.
Yeah, like also the news
Wait,
25 evidence is
so-
talking about assuming the energy.
Okay, but so that doesn't mean that other climate policies cannot cause core clog, so can they
This
cause
is, yeah,
core
this is
clog?
defense that you can read in
Yeah, okay,
speech.
but is there a possibility, I'm just asking the question, that they cause core clog?
Once you read this argument, you'll feel confident.
Okay. Do you want
No.
Okay, sending doc now. Yeah. I'm just kidding. Oh, this is. Alright, it should be on the chain.
Yeah.
Let us know when everyone gets done.
Yeah, change everything. I'm gonna see.
Maybe one second. I'm good.
On their core club, they have not read unique this picture that is coherent with their impact. Their argument is that innovation in the status quo is sufficient to resolve impacts for their integrity evidence. That's not true. Innovation is going backwards. Reuters 24. Time filing slipped. The U.S. rewarded fewer filings, falling 5.3%. Second, they also read Reuters evidence, but there's a big problem with it because it postdates their McNeil evidence by 10 years and finds the courts have efficient technology. This takes out their link insofar as the evidence saying courts will be overburdened doesn't assume the new tech that has come in the advent of the pandemic. Third, class action lawsuits solved empirically. Levinson 23 reports NuScale in a class action lawsuit, investors recoup losses. 4, this argument that they throw in there about perception is just incoherent. A, it is not nuclear energy that is solving the asteroid deflection about that their Hagerty evidence is descriptive of. B, companies aren't being litigated. It is the NRC and EPA for their McNeil evidence. Their empiric is terrible. It says the private companies are suing the government. It is not the private companies being sued. And insofar as their impact is about private companies doing innovation, you're not actually going to see these companies deter from doing innovation. Next, nuclear energy just replaces other forms of energy, which triggers the lawsuits anyways, because all energy sectors are prone to lawsuits for their evidence. On biodiversity, 1, it's statistically near zero risk. Ottaway writes a probability of an accident is small, 1 in 1 billion per year of operation. They will come up here and read here new factors that make it unique now. But even if this increases by a factor of 200%, 2 in a billion is still just so improbable, you're not voting for it. Second, Gilbert concedes the status quo is sufficient, and if anything, the affirmative solves. It says, quote, Congress addressed concerns when it passed NEIMA, and it says, quote, expanded resources are needed to ensure NRC remains a leader in regulation. The only side that can solve is the affirmative. Third, their good 23 evidence is just wrong. Nuclear energy produces the least radiation and no meltdown impact. Rose 18, who is a scholar at Harvard, MIT, and Stanford, should definitely be preferred. He writes, nuclear produces less radiation than any other source. Coal, a major source of radioactive releases. 3 Mile Island received radiation dose of 1 milligram. Exposure from an X-ray is 6. Their 3 Mile empiric also answers the accident argument. This argument is just untrue. 4, the accident argument is so silly. If one species alone died and triggers extinction, then it's too late because deforestation, overfishing, ocean acidification all should have triggered the impact. 5th, no one has to spill how it spills up to humans. It doesn't. Side on 97. Humans survive at 99.9% of species when extinct. 6, their LS evidence has their LS argument has no warrant. It concedes war causes biodiversity loss, not the other way around, saying, quote, poisonous Agent Orange destroyed forest cover. It's ludicrous to claim that the Vietnam War was caused by diversity loss, but clearly their evidence suggests that it is war that caused biodiversity loss, not the other way around. On the terror argument, 1, groups will not overpower law enforcement. Biden 22 writes, although right-wing causes have supporters, many are unskilled, making them easy prey for law enforcement. Hold the line, their Earnhardt evidence is clearly descriptive of right-wing terror groups. There are no other groups specified. Also, why do they want to use nukes if Trump is president and they're liking the current administration? And the impact just isn't about domestic groups, so there's clearly a mismatch. Moreover, their evidence also concedes that because of things such as poor organization, they're never going to be able to do it, even if there are these new Haley reactors. Second, security reforms are coming. DOE on March. DOE issued $900 million to support SMRs, funding the U.S. SMRs with the NNSA to incorporate safeguards and security addressing key graphs. Proves that you don't need the NRC, and proves that the NRC is unprepared in the status quo, which none of you see one, and you're preferring this because it's 10 times more specific than their trashy accountable evidence. Third, if they win that we are vulnerable, then the link is a reason to affirm. If the DOE's intent are to secure SMRs, then further investment is good. 4, too many barriers and number 18. A terrorist must break in a plant guarded by armed guards, hoist nuclear fuel into an industrial truck capable of hauling 100 tons, drive for hours on freeway while escaping officers scrambling to respond, in turn waste into a bomb you need to read process without anyone noticing. Terrorists who want to bomb just break in a hospital, waste is available. Also, you can steal from other countries. There's no reason why the US is unique. Just cut the last word from me, Mark.
That is your
One last reason.
Column.
take that.
Starting. That was 23 seconds.
And see, 2 on our side.
You know?
Do you want to see? I don't think policy.
Yeah, just
I want to be cool, but. Maybe one day. We get this in. Good. Well, by the defense on courts, on the NRC, the first response that they read is that it's near zero risk, but their evidence is from the IAEA saying that they're doing a fantastic job of regulation, but their second response about it's a 2 in a billion probability is debater math. Our evidence indicates that historically new designs getting processed has the risk of a large risk of an accident because there's a complete lack of oversight. Don't let them do their own math. The next thing that they say is that Congress is solving now, but their evidence concedes that despite some regulation being passed in 2021, Congress still has done nothing to largely appropriate more funding to the NRC, which is why our evidence indicates that with the Trump presidency, affirming overstretches the NRC resources, which prevents enforcing safety and testing regulations. They say it is less radiation than other sources, but they have conceded two separate links on our argument. The first is that nuclear waste is improper disposal measures, oversight is poor, and waste is radioactive, which gets into water, killing animal life and ruining biodiversity, and uranium mining kills biodiversity, pollutes waterways, and increases carbon emissions. Their evidence is not talking about specifically 3 Mile Island, but there's precedent for worse disasters than 3 Mile Island, i.e. Chernobyl. The next thing that they say is that all causes trigger, but while the vast majority of these scenarios don't kill like base populations, i.e. deforestation still allows for some adaptation, but our scenario allows for the instant killing of these species, which deforestation doesn't do. They say that humans can survive 99.9%. There is not a warrant given on their evidence. Our analysis is that the vast majority of conflicts is linked to biodiversity decreases. For example, the Vietnam thing that they say is an example of a chemical weapon, which a power plant essentially is. It's a big chemical weapon which destroys the environment. And our evidence indicates that die-offs are the basis for entire ecosystems, causing a chain reaction. Go to Howard. The first thing that they say is that it's not going, is that Trump is the president in the status quo, but our evidence indicates that right-wing terrorist groups are still never satisfied because Trump is constantly passing fear-mongering rhetoric that it's not good enough and that people are coming to get us. The second thing that they say is that they're never going to do it, but our HALO scenario is uniquely conceded that newer reactors will use HALO because of its power. It's already enriched at a level of a dirty bomb. They say that reforms are coming now, but they have conceded Chris Wright has historically gutted safety and defense measures, which postdates their analysis. They say historically attacks have never happened, but they have considered the exporting scenario, which that even if the U.S. has good security domestically, adopting HALO would allow for its export abroad to nations which lack safety requirements. Go to their case. On Mars, number one, extinction at home isn't inevitable, even with new proliferating threats. The 4T23 finds that our species is likely to change dramatically over the coming eons. If we get our shit together, indefinite prolongation of life is an inalienable good. Second, the afflux and extinction Singer 1, however, the technology to build isolated extraterrestrial settlements naturally brings along with another potentially powerful technology, the ability to move sizable asteroids, destroying all human life on Earth on continuous power. One, alternative sources are continuous and can solve. Harish finds that geothermal energy may be the answer. They suggest that utilizing heat extraction technologies is the key to humans living on Mars. Cut the card there. On lateral innovation, alternative solvencies like the private sector, Chiron 24 finds that private companies are the foremost competition is creating a rich environment for technological advancements. The commercialization space is another significant factor that will drive future exploration. Cut the card there. Go to C2 on transition. Number one, transition now is fast enough. Goalie 25 solutions are coming to race forward. Positive tipping points are happening worldwide. Emissions will peak and decline in 25, and we're the only evidence read about total emissions gap in 25 and 2024. Emissions are falling by 1.8%, and models are overestimated. Wave 21 catastrophe reacts heavy on heavy models, but models are overshooting by 5 times. Second, they cook time frame from a litany of reasons. One nuclear power plant takes on average 14.5 years to build. Utility scale wind and solar farms take an average 2.5 years. Then go to their first look on climate. We weren't, actually, you can cross-apply the arguments we make from case. If biodiversity is a prerequisite, we'll make that argument in the back half. On peak oil, one, peak oil is taken demand will peak before supply. Remember 25, peak oil is a meme, driven by people with no industry experience. Peak oil ignored the economies, fracking and horizontal drilling, unlock massive U.S. oil resources, preserving decades of decline.
What's on that side?
Sorry. I don't agree with girls.
Different cross.
Yeah.
Here, you may actually let me do.
I'll give it girls.
The first card you read says, if humanity, quote, gets its shit together,
I'm sorry. You're sorry.
Your first card says, quote, if we get our shit together, we're fine. What makes you think we've got our shit together?
The argument is just that we shouldn't ditch the rock, right? And I guess proof of concept of why we're getting our shit together is we read a bunch of defense on EOC 2, which says that we're doing things like reducing emissions. That's an example of us getting our shit together.
Okay, how does that mean that we're getting our shit together on pandemics and asteroids?
Well, it's an example. You asked for an example when it comes to climate change. That is an example of us trying to get our crap together for pandemics. I could say like massively streamlining research that happened during COVID is an example of getting our shit together. And then for asteroids, we have things like DART with NASA where they can shoot a little rocket up which deflects it. A lot of examples of us getting our shit together, for lack of a better word. I'll take a question.
You can find yours.
Yeah, crap, I guess. Sorry. Let's talk about. Let's go to peak oil.
Yeah.
Right. So, what evidence do you read that says how expensive is nuclear energy compared to oil?
Compared to oil?
Yeah.
Our argument is that oil is being phased out now. That's the Wasserman, the first card we read on the argument. Worland tells you that fossil fuels are already decreasing. We're not using fossil fuels anymore. But we are not investing enough in a form of green tech, and our argument is that nuclear energy is the best form of green tech.
Wait, I don't understand that. Peak oil, the argument is that we run out of oil, so there's a shock to our market. You just said we're already not using it.
Yeah, I think fundamental economics dictate that when you have a shortage of something and high demand, that causes prices to increase. Our argument is that with nuclear energy, even if in the short term it might be more expensive, it is abundant energy which resolves this.
But the reason as to why the shortage happens is that we run out of oil. You just told me that we're already switched.
No, I've said that we're running out of oil, but not investing enough in reactors or green
But you said we're using other
in the void.
Wait, but the response that I asked you, but we're switching to other to other like things like solar panels. You said yes, but they're not good enough.
If we need, to power 10 homes, and we only have enough electricity from green tech to power 5 homes, then we still need more.
Okay, so that's the argument.
Alright, can I ask you a question?
Yeah, go for it.
Let's talk about Chris Wright. This accountability evidence. Where does it talk about security?
It says like verbatim safety / security.
Where does it say security?
Let me pull it, right?
Zeke, we got this evidence. I promise you, it just doesn't say that.
Yeah, I know you got this evidence. Which is why
Yeah, it doesn't say that. So next question. Which
I'm gonna
answer.
answer. Wait, let me answer. So, Wright will look the other way when companies. Yeah. So I don't understand.
So
You haven't read evidence which says that Chris Wright is willing to implement more safety standards.
Alright, we'll take that.
2.5.
If you want to add anything. Alright. The R case, their case. New cards.
You said and.
Except the argument on space, Rico voices that we get to Mars soon due to Musk's rockets and unique planetary alignment which allows us to link up opportunity from 2026 to 2028. He must confirm to take that opportunity and to extend and relies on nuclear reactors to power colonies in Mars and Alpha for galactic travel and terraforming. That's all upon, but more investment is needed in nuclear investment because it isn't one with the dust like solar energy, maintains life support systems for wind, Hagerty makes a triodized extinction on Earth, is inevitable through disasters like pandemics or asteroids, and every second of delayed colonization costs 10 to the 14 lives because we use on energy from distant stars that we could use to expand life. Let's just go to their responses. The first thing they say is that extinction at home is inevitable. Get our shit together is not a war. That doesn't solve the fact that, for example, asteroids will fly with the Earth. The only thing that the card talks about is climate change. But even then, they also concede the fact that there is no innovation now on their first argument of core cloud. Right now, we are seeing that the amount of patent filings is decreasing. The card specifically outlines that patent filings are the things that make it, or like innovation is the thing that makes it so that we avoid extinction now. And if that's going down, it's tried to be out. Furthermore, the card just says, quote, accordingly, we need to become an interplanetary species. It like concedes the thesis of the argument. The second thing they say is that like we can use like isolated extraterrestrial settlements cause extinction. There's no war. Why countries start directing asteroids into the Earth? Hold the line for new explanations in the second summary. There's no reason for a country to attack the Earth insofar as it kills them all too when they strike the asteroid. Third, they say that there's like geothermal energy that can solve. They have conceded the analysis that it's too heavy to transfer only via the evidence about what can happen and the only evidence that shows that what is likely to happen and what is able to happen, and that is the nuclear energy because it is small and transportable. Finally, they say that like lateral innovations on unique will concede that we're not going for that. Like at that point, go to the weighing page first. It's triodide. Conceding Hagerty's terminal defense on the negative extinction is inevitable. Only affirming has a risk of solving, meaning near the only risk of solving. Even winning a 99.9% risk of the negative 0.01% risk of the app warrants an app valid because it's the only argument not terminally non-unique that answers time frame and shorter circuits. Even if extinction happens this second, it would have happened anyway. So you should take any minuscule chance that the negative's wrong. The app is ready to save humanity. 2 probability. They can only access one extinction scenario, but affirming themselves every earthly extinction risk possible, including theirs. And fourth, we would say that every second of delayed colonization is 10 to the 14 lives lost. That outweighs 8 billion people, even if they both go on to have infinite generations. Their scales of infinity mean that you prefer the larger starting value. Let's go on to their case, because they're definitely not winning their argument. Start on this first argument, on the second argument about biodiversity. Like, we'd say, sure, maybe our evidence talking about how it's low probability is from the IAEA, but that just no matter, even if it's from the IAEA, they don't just lie about things. It is still a small amount of accidents, it's still a small amount of risk, which decks the probability, but even then, they have no warrant as to how nuclear reactors take out keystone species. At that point, you have 0 warrant versus 0 warrant. You're going to prefer a statistical analysis that humans can survive without 99.9% of other species. On their argument about how they first off conceded the fact that right-wing terror will always be stopped by law enforcement, meaning that they don't get the domestic link insofar as they can't storm an SMR if the police come and take you. But second, they've explicitly conceded the fact that nuclear energy is not unique. HALEU is already being used in research reactors per their Robinson evidence. At that point, if terrorists abroad really wanted to get HALEU and building a nuclear bomb was the biggest priority, they should have been able to rate it. But even then, they also concede the fact that plutonium is sufficient to build a nuclear bomb, and that comes from things like hospital waste, which means the scenario is terminally not unique. You can't work with that.
Okay, we'll start taking credit. The order is going to be starting on our case. Wang. Is everyone here?
Yeah.
Cool. Time starts now. We're gonna go for argument about Halo Loop. To use that Halo Loop hasn't been distributed. New reactors are using Halo Loop its alpha. Halo is rich enough to be used as bomb. Better finds the Trump's cost plans for Halo plans that from states and only points to Halo plans across the country to adoption. We're gonna go for the conceded proliferation scenario. UCS funds that US companies export Halo reactors throughout and other countries model nuclear programs after the US. However, none funds that countries can use highly enriched Halo fuel to get a nuclear base. Maximize the proliferation is vulnerable to not function and this calculation which would trigger all out nuclear war and extinction. Good at the responses. Good at the responses. The first thing that they say is the fact that groups cannot get past law enforcement. This is not responsive at all to our proliferation scenario since the news gets sent abroad. Then they say that Halo is already used in research reactors. A, this argument is just not in rebuttal anywhere. And second, our evidence specifically finds it's used in extremely small quantities, which means it's obviously not enough to cause a bomb and cause the same security risk. Lastly, they say that you can get plutonium from hospitals, but A, they can see that this plutonium is not enriched, which means it's hydrogen still close to us. It just takes far longer to get enriched uranium. And second, they just conceded the evidence that they can get nuclear weapons in days because of the Halo reactors already being enriched and being really easy to convert into nuclear weapons. On the Wang date, let's start with their Wang. The first thing that they say is that it's going to be try or die. You can extend the diversity evidence. The fact that humanity always adapts to all of these threats. We do things in order to prevent extinction and things like increasing renewables and climate change. For instance, in the DART program for asteroids, then they say that there's no innovation right now for RC1, but that's not indicative of overall investment. Our argument is that there's still some innovation that's passed, specifically on the things that are most important, which we are able to solve. Then they say that we don't have a warrant that's specifically climate change. But our argument is that humans adapt. For instance, the DART program with NASA is give an example and solves for all their arguments. Lastly, they say that it just concedes an extinction scenario. It doesn't at some point. They say it's like 10 to the 14 people die. No, A, this is just complete debate or not. And second, it only takes one extinction scenario to wipe out everyone, which means you should always prioritize solving the nearest extinction scenario first, because that means we can at least have a chance of going to the leaving the rock in the future. On our way, they have to concede that it takes 14 years to actually develop reality. Insofar as that's true, we're so ahead of the time for this conceded evidence that it takes a couple of basic nuclear weapons. And second, it pre-regs means no one's ever going to focus on getting off the rock if everyone has nuclear weapons. We're all looking to the third war. Let's go to the argument. On Mars, the first thing to extend is that confirmed cause extinction because getting off the planet there's new technology being used as a weapon and inflected on Earth. They say that why are countries doing it? Our argument isn't necessarily about purpose, but even if an accident happens, asteroids still get deflected, which means that you prefer our scenario. The second, you can extend that geothermal will solve. They say that's too heavy for this. Our evidence indicates that you can already get out to the Mars. The reactors themselves are pretty light, and you can get the energy from Mars itself.
You ready for grad? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay. Grad has take the first question. Where does the argument that you read in rebuttal say the word accident?
One on the defense?
The aflossing distinction singer one card, can you just point the line that you read that said accident?
I guess, no, it's just the argument we're backlining there, sorry.
So you backline with a new warrant. Okay, that's fine. You can take the question.
It's just like a new way in which it can happen. It's like you can see that the technology can be used to deflect asteroids.
And you also can see that countries don't use it that way. Do you
Yeah.
want me to take the
That
question?
doesn't respond
Or
to
do you want to take
miscalc.
the question?
That doesn't respond to miscalc though, it's the way we.
Where did your
back-
guard make a claim about miscalc anyway?
Pax does in case.
Passive, you don't explicitly
Vengeful
state that.
heads.
Also, wait, the
I
passive
still
is
have a case
about nuclear weapons.
It's just the way that we're making background, like you.
Weapons are the same as asteroid deflection systems.
To clarify, you're going to say my evidence about nuclear proliferation and miscalculation is also going to magically apply to asteroid deflection technology.
No, that's not what I'm saying.
Oh,
I'm just saying that
that's
it's the way that we back on the evidence. You can dispute
So
this.
the way you back on the evidence.
You can make a response to speech about this.
You're
You didn't let me-
just or no. You're the way you're backlining is cross applying evidence on proliferation
No.
to asteroid deflection.
I just said no.
Okay.
That's
You
not
want
what
a
we need to do. We don't
Yeah.
need to win packs to win the defense.
You want a question?
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
We're here to
Okay. Let's talk about the. Let's talk about like the time frame. Or let's talk about nuclear reactor on Mars.
Yes.
why do we specifically need nuclear reactors to build?
Yeah, I think I did a pretty good job in first cross rematching this, but I can tell you again, specifically, let's talk about the first thing. First, you only need 4 nuclear reactors to fully power a Mars colony. That means that it's the least investment option. Second, nuclear power plants are uniquely light enough to be transferred onto Mars. Third, wait, don't worry, I'm not finished. Third, the uranium argument specifically says that right now, not right now, that the uranium particles that are emitted aren't like spilling over. Fourth, it says that NASA has already developed these systems. And fifth, it says that it's just like, it's the most like efficient way to create energy. Do you want to make this question?
What is this question?
We have a minute left, you might be thinking.
I really want to ask one.
Well, don't spend
Okay, so how does proliferation cause extinction?
evidence.
Tax evidence.
Explain.
Malfunctions.
Malfunctions or miscalculation.
Miscalculation, so like, what does that look like?
Countries get nuclear weapons. A lot of newly proliferated states have faulty weapons technology, which increases the risk of like a malfunction of the weapon.
Alright, do you want a question? 30 seconds left.
Yeah.
I guess like where in your evidence does it say that pollution nuclear can solve?
What is it?
Where in your evidence does it say that pollution nuclear can solve? Like even if nuclear could work, where does it say that nothing else works?
It makes index on everything else, or what evidence is just really on this question, but that's not that else.
Okay, we have 30 seconds left. We'll run. Okay.
Everyone good? You're voting off of space. The Greenfield board said that we'll be able to travel to Mars by 2026. However, in order to settle, we need nuclear energy. That's the combo evidence. And the UN evidence said the affirmative is the best way of doing this because nuclear energy is the most consistent, is the safest, is the best weight, and has been empirically proven. This answers your argument about geothermal because geothermal has not been proven and we cannot test it until we get there, which is why you must err heavily on using nuclear energy. At that point, the next response they talk about is how we're going to start launching after each other. But come on, there's just not a warrant here. Your warrant on nuclear systems malfunctioning just does not apply to asteroids. No evidence suggests so, so you should be very hesitant to vote on this argument. Definitely not offense. This is very mitigatory defense at best. Lastly, they just talk about how tech and innovation is solving. No, they've explicitly conceded that statistical measures prove that tech is going backwards. Remember the Reuters evidence, we're decreasing innovation globally to the point where that's true and we're seeing less patents being filed. You know for a fact that we're going backwards. We are not solving. The point where that's to extend the rest of the argument. Look, their own evidence concedes that we need to become multiplanetary, other things that they have not accounted for, such as the sun blowing up, asteroids, pandemics, that they do not explicitly address will all cause human extinction, so the only way to solve is to get off the rock, because clearly we are not getting our crap together. At that point, the weighing is just conceded. A 0.1% of the act outweighs since extinction is inevitable. The neg is totally non-unique, so you should take a 0.1% risk of the affirmative since it is the only risk you can solve extinction. They are making a time frame claim, but they can only short circuit us if they're winning 100% risk of the neg, otherwise there's still a chance that the act can happen, the act can solve inevitable extinction. The only risk of solving inevitable extinction is the affirmative, and its answer is time frame way. And remember, if we win 0.1% risk of the affirmative, we're winning the round. Let's answer their arguments because they're not winning it. They've conceded that in rebuttal and summary we've said that other countries exist, other countries also have nuclear energy, other countries also have nuclear reactors and forms of nuclear weapons, which means that they can just steal it from other countries. They don't need the US. This was in rebuttal and not in response to in their rebuttal, so you should be incredibly skeptical of any responses they gave later, and this was definitely stated in Alexis' summary and undercovered by their case. Very simple, some degree of defense on their case, and a very mitigated risk and mitigated ask compels you to vote out.
It's gonna go Palu, Wang, then their case. Everybody good?
Extend HALEU, EARN finds that there's no risk of nuclear terror now because Robin continues that HALEU fuel hasn't been distributed. New reactors are using HALEU because of its output. HALEU is enriched enough to be used as a bomb. Geiger finds that Trump calls plans for HALEU plants, but affirming necessitates millions in funding to HALEU plants across the country, leading to adoption. We'll go for the proliferation scenario. UCS finds that U.S. companies export HALEU reactors abroad and other countries' model nuclear programs after the United States. However, none finds that countries can use highly enriched HALEU fuel to get a nuke in days. And Pax continues that proliferation leaves us vulnerable to malfunctions because of faulty technology and miscalculation, which could trigger all-out nuclear war, which causes famines and extinction. Their only response is that other countries have reactors. But what they have conceded is that even if other countries have the reactors, because the United States has not implemented HALEU yet, these other countries don't have it either because the U.S. hasn't been able to export it yet. But once we do the affirmative and increase investment, that's when the HALEU gets used domestically and also gets exported across the other countries, and why HALEU is uniquely enriched compared to other scenarios, which allows them to get a nuclear weapon in days. On the time frame scenario, it has been conceded that it takes 14 years to build a nuclear power plant, so if we are winning our extinction scenario, you should vote for us to preserve humanity as long as possible to be able to solve back for them. Extinction is extinction. If we're winning a risk of our scenario, you vote before them. Moreover, we're winning that Dvorsky analysis that extinction is not inevitable in the status quo. Yes, maybe things like patent violence are going down, but innovation has still consistently been happening, which is why if we stay domestically, there is not a risk of extinction happening. Do not get off the rock and just throw away humanity. On their case, extend geothermal. Our argument is that geothermal technology can independently solve back for a continuous fuel. They say that their evidence takes it into account, and their evidence is really good. I highly encourage you, go to their document command of geothermal. It does not take it into account once. We've warned that our evidence says that the technology is proven and has the capacity to work on Mars, which is why it does the comparative that their study doesn't. It finds that geothermal is the future.
Right.
consistent with our previous pattern. Where's my colleague?
She'll be right back.
Excellent. I started to announce the decision and then realized you weren't here. So I'm sorry. Not to worry. Consistent with a previous pattern between my colleague and myself, we have a split decision. Congratulations to both teams for getting to the semis and on a 2-1 Fairmont preference. I was the one. And that I think that's important in this round, honestly, that there be a split decision, because I don't think there was enough actual directing of a judge's attitudes and perspectives and where we start in the debate. I usually say this is because the debaters have tried to do too much in the round, but I don't think that's true. In some ways, I think we've narrowed the debate too much in this round while still not digging into the issues with the extra time that you gave yourselves. I don't really see why it is not possible for other countries to produce this HALU stuff that the con talks about a ton. But at the same time, I don't really find the pro story that we are going to, we're all going to die, the species will become extinct if we don't use that particular tech or nuclear to get to Mars, especially when one of the scenarios extended in final is the sun blowing up. And I hate to tell you this, but if the sun blows up, Mars ain't going to be any safer than Earth. Now that was new-ish in final, but that's at the level of not really digging down to why it is we absolutely positively cannot survive without the investment in nuclear power, and increased investment in nuclear power is what the topic specifies. And so I don't think we're talking enough about the topic on the pro side. I think the con is probably not doing enough, and this is probably why I sat, probably wasn't doing enough to say, hey, look, other countries aren't going to be able to export this technology. Extinction is kind of a throwaway line in the final. But at the same time, I don't know why why an increase in investment is necessary to get us to Mars if that's what we're supposed to do. And so I think I kind of vote con on presumption. Yeah, pro hasn't proven it.
Yeah, Kaz and I coach the same way, but we've never once decided the same on a panel, which is just, we agree about this happens literally every time. I felt that second final was really new, particularly on the geothermal laying and on the HALU implementation. I think that I would like to first start by saying, like, y'all did so much to your case that really made that contention so much better. And I don't want that to go, like, seeing it in quarters and then seeing it again now, like, it is so clear that you, like, really took into account, like, the advice from the panel, and you were like, let's make this better, and it really was significantly better. I think that, for me, it comes down to, truthfully, how new the final was on the questions of where Hallyu has been implemented or not. I don't really see a clear reason why other countries don't non-unique it until final, which made it kind of icky for me to vote on. And I think that, truthfully, on the pro case, conceding on your own case that innovation is down, and then saying, like, we're getting ourselves together, which, by the way, is the better way to say that, getting ourselves together and we are innovating, but you just innovation is low. So it's really hard for you to go for that in final, saying like geothermal, all this other stuff, but you're already conceding that tech isn't happening. So, and they carry that through final, and I think that for that, plus the, even if it's only 0.1%, means that I end up affirming.
Yeah, I mean, I think my reasoning was very similar to that. I also do agree that, like, clearly, like, you guys took our suggestions from yesterday. I think it was still kind of a hard sell. Like, I think the narrative of both space and terror, I struggle with both of them, like, in an actual element of, like, what I think this topic could be expanded to from a debate standpoint. Also, I think that, like, whenever someone's running space and Mars and this element of, like, colonization, there's just so many ways to, like, tear that down from a questioning standpoint of what that realistically looks like. All the ways that that's honestly, arguably just, and the fact that, like, especially if you're getting into, like, any form of a colonization realm, the multiple issues of that. I know they don't totally go for that, but, like, just in general, what that really, like, narrative again, like, actually looks like. I think for me, a lot of it came down to, like, also just the weighing thing of, like, again, what she said about the 1.1% innovation is kind of like where my ballot came down to. I also just think that, like, the narrative of going for pro-lift at the end, I think almost, like, made me kind of question my ballot a little bit, because I don't think it was strongly responded to, even in rebuttal. Like, when I go back, look at the rebuttal doc, there's not, like, a strong enough response, like, there, and about pro-lift. But I think that, like, at the same time, there's a lot of reasons to, like, argue how we get to that in the first place, like they're saying. But yeah, that's, like, where my decision lied, so.
Seriously, congrats on making it to semis. It's a massive accomplishment.